The Human Rights Tribunal. The provisions of the Charter relating to the Tribunal, sections 100 and subsequent, actually came into force on the anniversary date of the adoption, on the 10th of December 1948, of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations General Assembly. What is more, as the constituent legalization of the Tribunal, the Charter includes a diversity of rights that is unequaled in human rights law in Canada, and that in effect essentially reflects its close kinship not only with the Universal Declaration, but also with such international instruments of human rights as the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights and the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. So they say that the Human Rights Charter of Freedom in Quebec, that it reflects its close kinship not only to the Universal Declaration. So they're declaring that the Declaration of Human Rights and Freedoms in Quebec reflects its close kinship to the Universal Declaration. Quebec. Now, if you notice this symbol, this is the same symbol that you will find on your copy of your Act of Birth. This security symbol, Quebec. Whereas every human being possesses intrinsic rights and freedoms designed to ensure his protection and development. So every human being possesses intrinsic rights. Intrinsic. Belonging to a thing by its very nature, not dependent on external circumstances, inherent and essential. So, intrinsic. Whereas all human beings are equal in worth and dignity and are entitled to equal protection of the law. Whereas it is expedient to solemnly declare the fundamental human rights and freedoms in a charter, so that they may be guaranteed by the collective will and better protected against any violation. Therefore, Her Majesty, with the advice and consent of the National Assembly of Quebec, enacts as follows. The Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedoms declares that the human being has intrinsic rights and freedoms that are there to ensure its protection and development. So every human being possesses intrinsic rights. This is saying that these rights, they belong to you by your nature. By the fact that you are a human being, you possess these rights. It's inherent to you. It's part of you. It's part of being human being. These rights are part of you because you are a human being. By your nature, by that expression. So anytime you are declared, or anytime there is a declaration that here stands a human being, automatically there are rights attached to that human being. Continuing in the preamble of the Quebec Charter's Rights and Freedoms, it says that the recognition of the human being's rights and freedoms, this act, by doing this, by recognizing the human being's rights and freedoms, this constitutes the foundation, the building point, the starting point of justice, liberty, and peace. That's what they declare. So to recognize the rights of a human being is the foundation of all justice, liberty, and peace. In the Universal Declaration of Human Rights that the UN created, that Canada was the primary drafter of, and that Canada signed to, it says that the human rights that we as human beings are entitled to are food, clothing, housing, education, and medical care. Those are the rights that are attached to you because you are a human being. These are the rights that are granted to you because you are a human being. Human rights and freedoms, fundamental freedoms and rights. Every human being has a right to life and to personal security. inviolability, and freedom. He also possesses a juridical personality. Every human being whose life is in peril has a right to assistance. So Article 1 of the Quebec Charter of Human Rights and Freedom states that every human being has a right to life, personal security, inviolability, and freedom. So every human being has all these rights attached to them. Every human being has the right to personal security. Now, personal security is not meaning to the protection of your person with the police or anything like that. It's talking about personal security in equation to meaning a place to live, food to eat, clothing on your back, and if you're ever sick, to know that someone's there to help you. These are the conditions that lead unto personal security. Article 2 of the Charter states that every human being whose life is in peril, whose life is in danger, whose personal security is in danger, then has a right to assistance. So everyone whose life is in peril. So then obviously Article 1, that's talking about personal security, that your human being has the right to personal security. It's not talking about this type of security, peril and danger in your life. It's talking about as I've described. So it states in the Quebec Charter of Rights and Freedoms that every human being, once again, has a juridical personality. And you're going to see within the Charter the expression of the juridical personality again. So the first two articles that you've seen so far, it talks about a human being and what rights a human being has. Now the rest of the articles in this Charter, except for Article 50, well, most of them refer to now legal persons. Every person is, every person has, every person has, a person's home is, every person has, every person has. No more about human beings, now it's legal persons. Fundamental freedoms. They're no more talking about humans now, but they're talking about rights that they've returned to you as a person. A legal person. It says every person is the possessor of fundamental freedoms, including freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of opinion, freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. So here now, it's not every human being has fundamental rights, it's every person possesses fundamental freedoms. Article 3 of the Quebec Charter of Rights and Freedom states that now every person, notice now, the human being is gone now. Every person possesses fundamental freedoms. So the person possesses fundamental freedoms while the human being, he has intrinsic rights that are attached to the human. So two different functions of law, two different operations of law going on right now. A legal person is possessing fundamental freedoms that have been granted to them or given to them, and a human being has intrinsic rights that are attached to them. Now, what are the fundamental freedoms that a legal person has been given according to this charter? So every legal person then, they possess fundamental freedoms, no more rights that are intrinsic to their nature. And the freedoms that they possess are freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, freedom of opinion, freedom of expression, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom to associate whatever they want. Now if you notice, the rights and entitlements of a legal person are totally, absolutely different compared to the rights and entitlements of a human. A human being is entitled to housing, food, clothing, water, medical care, education. These are the rights that have been granted to a human being. Well, a legal person does not have those rights granted to them. The rights that are granted to them are what you see here. So as you saw, there are indeed two different operations of law that are going on within the context of Canada. One operation of law is for a human being, and it functions for a man. And what a man is entitled to, what a man is gifted to for being a man, is totally different than the rights that a legal person is entitled to. So this is why there's people across, and men and women across Canada right now, who are trying to express themselves and are reclaiming their rights back as a man or as a woman, as a human being. Because we understand and we see that within this designation there's so much more that is afforded to you. As you noticed in these past two videos, what's being talked about is fundamental needs. There's no provision in law for you to go out and have a Ferrari bought for you. There's no provision in law for them to buy you the latest fishing boat, for example, or an ATV. If you have personal agreements with the government, if you begin to understand the finances that are at work, I can't say anything about that. But what they're obligated to in the codes and what they're obligated to under the charter is fundamental needs, as you saw. And they specifically mention what the needs are. So anything else you'll have to work for. Anything else you'll have to put your energy into in order to acquire your entertainment or your wants. But your fundamental needs as a human being, there is charters and there is mechanisms that are available to meet those needs for you. And they are your rights. And I know that sometimes it is hard, like I said, for even myself, it is still hard, and it was hard in the beginning to realize that just because I am a human being, that I have these rights and entitlements attached to me. And that they were taken away from me because I did not know that I had these rights and entitlements attached to me. But when we begin to understand that just by the fact that we are human beings, that there is provision for us, and that there is provision for us to have dignity and not to be brought into poverty and not to be trampled down in the society because for whatever reason we are not able to meet our fundamental needs. Again, this is tying in with our patrimony, because Quebec has offered us security, and the security that they have offered us through our patrimony is what we're finding in the Universal Declaration of the UN, those fundamental needs to be met. Now, whether that's in the form of monetary value or in a form of a discharged system, that we're unsure right now. I'll be having more information in the next couple of weeks, because I'm presently in contact with some government officials here in Quebec working on this matter concerning my patrimony. No suppression of right. Article 50. The Charter shall not be so interpreted as to suppress or limit the enjoyment or exercise of any human right or freedom not enumerated herein, meaning not mentioned in this charter. So Article 50 in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms of Quebec states that this charter, it cannot remove or limit your human rights in any way, shape or form. So any human rights that you've been granted, this charter here has no right to remove them. And if this charter does remove them or does not allow you to fulfill your human rights that's been granted to you, then you have a recourse in law to seek remedy.